The sun sagged low across the Arizona desert, spilling crimson and amber across the plains until every blade of brittle grass looked dipped in fire. Samuel paused, boots planted firm in the parched earth, his breath heavy with the dust he'd been swallowing all day. The wide-brimmed hat shielding his face from the merciless sky felt like a burden more than a blessing. He dragged a calloused hand over his forehead, smearing sweat into streaks of grit. Solitude clung to him the way shadows did at dusk, unshakable, constant, and heavy. Life on the frontier was never gentle. It was a war of attrition. Days stretched long beneath a sky that offered no mercy, while nights carried a different kind of torment, the piercing wails of coyotes, the endless creak of the wind, and the gnawing emptiness in his stomach. Food was a daily gamble. Sometimes a rabbit or a bird found its way into his traps, more often nothing did. But this evening, as the last colors of daylight bled into purple twilight, Samuel nursed a desperate hope that hunger would not go unanswered. He moved toward the place where he'd set an iron trap, his boots crunching softly over the dry stalks. His belly ached with hollow pangs, each step reminding him of the emptiness inside. His thoughts drifted to roasted rabbit, to the faint memory of turkey meat seasoned with wild herbs. His mouth watered at illusions. But as he drew near, what lay before him carved the air from his lungs. Samuel froze. It was no animal. The trap had sprung on a figure, a girl. She was young, though not a child. Her frame was lean, wiry, wrapped in buckskin the color of sand. Long black hair tumbled wildly around her face, some strands stuck to her damp skin where dust mixed with tears. She was breathing hard, her chest rising and falling like a trapped bird's. Her ankle was locked in the steel jaws, and every futile thrash only forced the metal deeper into her flesh. Samuel's heart clenched, pounding like a hammer inside his ribs. He had seen blood before. He had seen death, too. But never like this, never caused by his own hand. The girl's eyes met his, and for a long moment, time stalled. The prairie whispered around them, the wind carrying sage and grit across the wide horizon. Her gaze was like sharpened obsidian, hard and unyielding, yet trembling with fear. He recognized it. Not fear of pain, but fear of him. Stories hung in the air between them, stories of settlers who set fire to villages, of soldiers who chained families, of ranchers who took land without mercy. To her, Samuel was no different. She expected cruelty in his next move. He could see it in the way her muscles braced, in the way her lips trembled yet held back sound. His rifle, heavy and familiar, sat in his grip. For an instant he felt its weight as if it might answer the fear in her eyes. But no, the thought of raising it sickened him. Slowly, deliberately, Samuel lowered the weapon to the earth. The barrel kissed the dust. He lifted both hands, palms open, the universal gesture of surrender. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said, voice low, rough from thirst. He doubted she understood his words, but tone spoke louder than language. Her body stiffened. She made no reply, only a sharp intake of breath when the iron teeth dug deeper into her ankle. Blood slicked her skin, dark against the earth. She whimpered, soft, raw, unguarded. The sound tore at him, jagged and merciless. This wasn't supposed to happen. His traps were meant for beasts of the field, not daughters of the land. Guilt weighed heavier than his hunger. Samuel stepped forward slowly, each movement deliberate, as though he approached a wild creature ready to bolt. He knelt beside her, his shadow spilling across the wound. The trap gleamed in the fading light, cruel and unrelenting. He reached for the mechanism, fingers trembling, skin raw from days of rope and rifle work. The steel resisted him. His hands slipped, scraping against the edges until blood welled on his own palms. He grit his teeth, breath hissing between them, and pulled again. The trap groaned under strain, fighting like it enjoyed cruelty. At last, with one desperate heave, the jaws snapped open. The girl gasped, a sharp cry cut short as she yanked her leg free. The wound was ugly, flesh torn, blood staining the dirt in a small, steady pool. She trembled violently, unable to rise. Samuel backed away a step, giving her space, but his eyes clung to the injury. If left alone, it would fester. Infection was death out here. He knew it, And she knew it too. The girl pressed her palm against her ankle, glaring up at him with fire in her eyes. Pain bent her mouth, but defiance burned there too. She expected him to strike, to finish what the trap had begun. Samuel swallowed hard, heart pounding. Then, without a word, he gripped the hem of his own shirt and tore a strip free with his teeth. The sound of ripping cloth startled her. He held the fabric out, palms visible, moving slowly toward her. Her breathing quickened. She recoiled slightly, but her body betrayed her. She couldn't move far, not with that wound. Samuel's hands shook as he knelt beside her, the strip of fabric extended like an offering. She watched with wide eyes, her body tense, but didn't stop him. Carefully, with all the gentleness his rough hands could summon, Samuel bound her ankle. The cloth darkened quickly with blood, but it slowed the flow, tightening to hold life in place. The silence was deafening. Her breath came shallow, uneven, but she didn't fight him. Her gaze stayed fixed on his face, searching for malice. Samuel avoided her eyes, focusing on the task. His hands that had broken horses and fired rifles, trembled as they worked with tenderness he scarcely knew he had in him. There, he muttered, more to himself than her, pulling the knot firm. The prairie stretched endless around them, now drenched in shadow. They were two figures out of step with the world, an enemy and a stranger, yet bound by circumstance. The girl's chest rose sharply, falling in uneven rhythm. She should have spat hatred, yet she remained silent. She studied him instead, her face unreadable but her eyes less hard than before. Confusion tangled with fear. Samuel sat back on his heels, palms raw, sweat dripping from his brow. He had done what he could. Now it was her choice, to accept or to hate him all the more. She tried to rise. The effort made her stumble instantly, her injured leg folding beneath her. Samuel's instincts flared. Before she could hit the ground, he caught her in his arms. For one breathless moment, she was pressed against his chest. Her heart hammered against his, her breath sharp with panic. His grip was firm but not claiming. He steadied her, then released her as quickly as he had caught her. His voice came low, gentle, easy now. She flinched at the sound, suspicion flashing anew in her eyes. In Apache, she muttered words sharp as blades, her tone warning him off. He didn't need to know the language to understand the meaning. He raised his hands once more, palms open, the rifle still lying forgotten in the dust where he'd left it. He wanted her to see. He was no captor. Her lips trembled, confusion overtaking fury. Why would he help? The question hung heavy in her eyes. Night bled across the prairie, swallowing the land in indigo. Stars pricked through the veil, one by one, as though the sky watched in silence. Samuel glanced toward his campfire flickering faintly in the distance. He knew the choice before him was dangerous. If he left her, the wolves or cold would claim her. If he carried her, he risked her tribe finding him with her in his arms, mistaking him for an enemy. But the choice was no choice at all. Samuel sighed, a weary breath. His body moved before his mind caught up. He bent down, sliding his arms beneath her. The girl gasped, her fists clenching against his shirt, but he lifted her gently, carefully, as though she were something sacred. The fire was already burning low when Samuel reached his camp. He had laid it earlier, coaxing flames from brittle mesquite branches and a twist of dry grass. Now the embers pulsed like a beating heart, their glow casting long shadows that danced across the ground. Samuel knelt and laid the girl down gently on a wool blanket he had carried since his cattle days. Every movement was careful, as though she might break under his touch. The girl flinched as her injured ankle brushed against the earth, a sharp hiss of pain escaping her lips. Samuel drew back quickly, palms open, wordless reassurance in the gesture. She fixed him with a glare that could have burned hotter than the fire itself, but her strength was failing. Exhaustion weighed on her limbs. Her face was pale beneath the dust, her body trembling in spite of her efforts to remain defiant. Samuel fetched his canteen. The water sloshed faintly inside, precious as gold out here. He unscrewed the cap and held it toward her, arm extended but body kept back. She stared at it, her throat working, torn between suspicion and need. After a tense pause, she reached for it with shaking hands. Her lips brushed the metal rim as she drank. The water spilled over her chin, wetting the front of her tunic, but she didn't stop until she had taken enough to steady her breath. Then, with narrowed eyes, she thrust the canteen back toward him, as though to remind him she was no beggar. The night deepened around them. Coyotes yipped in the distance, their cries weaving with the rustle of grass. The fire's glow painted the girl's face in flickering amber, every shadow sharpening the planes of her cheekbones and the set of her jaw. She was beautiful in a fierce, untamed way, like the desert itself, harsh yet breathtaking. Samuel caught himself staring too long and turned back to the flames. He tossed another stick onto the fire, listening to the crackle. His muscles ached with fatigue, but he refused to lie down. He needed to keep watch, on her, and on the dark prairie stretching in every direction. The girl shifted slightly, testing the bandage he had tied around her ankle. The makeshift cloth was already stained, but it held firm. She touched it lightly, her brow furrowed. Her gaze slid back to Samuel. Her eyes were not soft, not yet, but they were no longer pure stone. Something in them wavered, confusion, perhaps, or reluctant curiosity. Samuel could feel her watching him. Every move he made, every breath he drew, she studied like a hawk. He kept his distance, sitting across from her, hands resting loosely on his knees. His rifle lay untouched a few feet away, deliberately out of reach. He wanted her to see that choice, to understand it. Hours dragged on, slow and heavy. Samuel fought the weight of sleep, his eyelids sagging but his will refusing to surrender. He thought of leaving her by the fire and stretching out on his bedroll, but the thought of her fear kept him awake. He had chosen this path, and he would not falter now. The girl's eyes grew heavy despite herself. Her body curled slightly on the blanket, her breath slowing, though every now and then she startled awake, scanning him with wary glances before drifting again. Samuel didn't blame her. Trust was not built in a night. He fed the fire, the flames crackling as sparks leapt into the dark. Somewhere, far away, an owl called. The prairie night pressed in, alive with unseen things. Samuel sat quietly, letting the silence settle, until at last her breathing evened out into the rhythm of sleep. He let out a long, weary sigh. His hands were raw, scraped from the trap, and the skin burned when he flexed them. He thought about what had happened, about the iron teeth biting into her flesh, about her cry when he freed her. Guilt pressed heavy against his chest. He could not undo it, but maybe, just maybe, he could atone. He leaned back, resting against a rock, and let his eyes close just for a moment. Dawn came with soft light, washing the prairie in hues of rose and gold. Samuel stirred awake, stiff from the cold ground. He blinked against the brightness, rubbing grit from his eyes. The fire had burned down to ash and faint embers. He turned, and found her watching him. She was propped up slightly on one elbow, her dark hair a tangled halo around her face. Her eyes were still sharp, but something inside them had shifted. Suspicion remained, but less sharp, as though dulled by thought. Her lips parted. The sound that left them startled him. Her voice was halting, accented, the English broken but clear enough. Samuel sat still, meeting her gaze. For a heartbeat, he didn't know how to answer. Then he found the truth, simple as breath. The girl's brows knit together. She searched his face as though trying to find deception hidden in the lines of it. But there was none. Samuel held her gaze steady, and for the first time, her eyes softened, only slightly, but enough. She dropped her gaze to the bandage around her ankle. Her hand brushed it lightly, then rested on it as though acknowledging what he had done. Samuel stood, stretching the ache from his shoulders, then reached down and offered his hand. She stiffened, but he didn't push. He simply waited, palm open, steady as the rising sun. After a long moment, she placed her hand in his. Light as a feather, trembling with hesitation. He helped her to her feet, steadying her as her injured leg buckled beneath her weight. She leaned on him out of necessity, her body tense but allowing the contact. They stood like that, framed by the endless horizon, two figures bound not by choice but by circumstance. Samuel glanced east, where the land stretched into miles of unknown. Her people might be searching. Or fate might carry them elsewhere. Whatever waited, the prairie was no longer empty. The bridge between them was fragile, built on nothing more than a night of firelight and a single choice of kindness. But out here, in the vast silence of the desert, sometimes that was enough.